Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to get started here in about 1 minute. Wanted to give everyone time to log into the meeting. Their last meeting may have run over. We have a special guest speaker today, Amy Eckelberger from Superior PR. Full disclosure, she's the principal of the PR firm for Rev1 Ventures, and we are delighted to have her join us today to talk about communication during times of crisis. It's especially relevant now when we're trying to figure out how to reach our customers, how to reach our funding partners, etc. So with that, I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thanks for having me. And thanks everyone who's joining. I know that during a crisis, an extra hour is hard to come by. So I appreciate you taking the time to check out what we have to say. I think it's useful information and practical with some real tips and tricks for what's worked for me in the past and other clients that I've represented. As Heather mentioned, I've worked with Rev1 for almost 5 years, and I've worked with a host of other companies in the emerging growth space across a wide range of technologies, primarily focused on B2B. So have had my fair share of experience managing different levels of crises. Nothing quite to this level of a global pandemic, but have definitely had to put plans in place to manage things that come up that we weren't necessarily hoping would happen. So with that, I hope this is something that you can take and use as a playbook, even at a high level of understanding why it might be worth taking a few minutes to listen to what we have to say. And so in terms of the agenda, yeah.
Oh, yeah, just wanted to give a call out that if you do have questions during this, we're going to leave questions to the end, but feel free as we're going through to put your questions into the Q&A, which is down at the bottom of your screen, and we will make sure to answer those at the end. So go ahead, Amy.
Perfect. Yeah, and jump in anytime throughout if there's questions or, like Heather said, comments or feedback. So in terms of how we've developed the agenda for today's discussion, we're going to focus on why it's important to effectively communicate during a crisis, even though that might seem like a no-brainer. Sometimes we're moving so quickly to keep the business moving that it's not always a first thought to step back and look at how we're communicating. And then secondarily, to who we're communicating with. I think there's sometimes audiences that can be forgotten, not intentionally, but again, focused on continuing to move business forward and keep operations moving. We want to make sure that we're communicating with all parts of people that are within your community. And then how to do that. So sample emails, some do's and don'ts as it relates to how to tell your story or how you're managing it. I've also included some very specific examples from my own experiences, both as a small business owner myself, as well as PR representation for other companies who've gone through crises outside of the current COVID pandemic. And then we'll leave it with some, just high-level takeaways, and then leave time for more specific Q&A. So with that, the why might seem obvious, but again, when I think we're talking about a global shutdown and shelters in place and how to manage the supply chain when things are being disrupted, it's easy to forget these things, but it's really worth repeating that even if you're only months into building your brand, you've definitely built up a reputation. And it takes a long time to do that. Even if you are in the early stages of building your company, reputations can be, something that take a long time to build, but can be diminished or even damaged quickly if things are not managed appropriately. Obviously, we all know this from living in today's world, but information travels very fast and opinions form very quickly, both because, customers talk, there's social media, your employees have quick access to information and ways to communicate with each other. So we want to make sure that we are, doing the best we can to communicate to all those parties, so that they have a positive opinion of how we're managing it. Effective communication can really mitigate brand risk, and it doesn't always mean being the loudest voice in the room. And I'll get into some examples of that with other companies that I've worked with, but it can mean having a relatively low profile, but being very selective about the words you're using when you're communicating with different parties to make sure that you're keeping your brand reputation intact. And then, very important, to disseminate information in a timely and accurate fashion. So obviously we are, almost 8 weeks into this shutdown. And so, I think this is looking to the next phase of how COVID transpires. And obviously this is not a COVID specific communicating during a crisis, because there's different types of crisis, whether a server goes down, you have an angry customer, you have issues in the press. So it doesn't, and not saying that those things are going to happen, but those are things to plan for outside of just the current environment. But when we're speaking about the current environment, I think next phases of reopening are going to be a very important time to implement some of these strategies, because your team, your customers, your investors, your partners are going to want to know how you're coming back to work, what your new normal looks like. As far as what happened when we first shut down, I would say that first week to second week is when you really want to start pushing the dialogue and communications about your company's strategy and how you're managing it, both externally and internally. But I think we have a lot of phases of this and a lot of layers. So I would say that, there's going to be time shortly to implement some of these things. Finally, when everyone's working from the same playbook and everyone understands at the center of it what our position is, and I mean everyone, from, again, investors, partners, customers, issues can be addressed more quickly. Everyone's on the same page about expectations, and I think you're just starting off on a much stronger foot. So in terms of the who, and this is the piece that I think can sometimes fall off. So I think everyone immediately goes to external. So that's customers, prospects, partners, investors, media, if you've ever engaged with media or if they're engaging with you. But I think on the left side, employees, contractors, and your other partners, whether it's outside sales teams or other companies that you're working with, are equally important and shouldn't be forgotten in terms of how you're communicating and who you're communicating with. All of these people make up your comprehensive community, and arguably they all play a very vital role in the success of your company beyond this crisis and to get you through this crisis. So we can talk a little bit more about that, but I think this is a good reminder of just at a very high level, who you should think about communicating with. And by that, I mean, regular touch points, crafting, email messaging, but it's important that you are, not neglecting one of these people. So the how, we already kind of talked about this, but it is critical to respond swiftly. Time kills deals and time fuels crises. So the more time that people have to communicate with each other, to put a presence out there on social media, inaccuracies that aren't corrected, it can just make it balloon into something much bigger. So that's why, again, planning and this type of exercise are so critical, because if you have a plan in place and generally speaking what your strategy is in terms of from soup to nuts, from a high level what the messaging would be, to the most bare bones, who's going to send the email. Knowing that ahead of time so that when, okay, we have to shut down, everyone's going to be working remotely, what do you do? So that means that you have a system in place to really move on it fast and get your communications out there. It's important to frame the facts while also being confident in what you're saying. And sometimes the facts, can be messy and not always positive in your favor. And then this is, again, separate, different events that can happen. But it's important to acknowledge errors and be truthful and be confident in your approach to move forward and to mitigate and fix it. So it's not worth it to hide away from it. It's not worth it to try to message around it to make it look like it didn't really happen, but to really just be confident in how you're going to address and fix it and ensure it doesn't happen again. This is a big one that I've found with a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with. They're very, very passionate, especially when it comes to their business and anyone that is speaking unfavorably about it. But it is very important to stay calm and to not react before really understanding and thinking through the whole situation. And then I've had a CEO in the past who just simply couldn't get in front of the media, who simply could not be the one to speak to investors because he just got way too heated, he got way too defensive, and it made us look more guilty about something that we didn't even do. So if that's the case, understand that about yourself, or understand that about your team, and figure out what is the best method of communication and who's the best person to deliver it if you're going to go an in-person or on the phone or webinar route. But staying calm instills confidence. Freaking out definitely doesn't. Regular flow of communication. Now, this is true for our current situation. It's important to have regular touch points. And it's not to say that every week of COVID, you should be sending an update because everyone's in the same boat and understand what's going on. But again, the different phases are trigger points to continue to update people on what's going on. Even if you feel like, well, everyone knows what's going on and they know we can't open yet. And yeah, maybe some businesses in Georgia are opening, but Ohio isn't. Well, it's worth it to address it when you see things are starting to change and just have a touch point so that you're regularly in contact with your community. They understand that you're on top of it and they don't feel neglected or ignored. And then we spoke about this already, but direct and indirect communication are all effective. So emails, newsletters, writing a blog. So if you don't want to each phase, send blast emails to your customers and prospects, maybe writing a blog about what our position is. Using social media selectively, but that's obviously a great way to support getting communications out there. And then it sounds, again, like it goes without saying, but I don't think that it does. It's important to speak and send communications with compassion and concern and care, because this is a stressful time. And whether we're talking about right now or, a different type of crisis, it can really cause some emotional moments for people, whether it's people within your business or people outside of it. So, acknowledging that is really important. I'll stop there for a minute before I get into 4 examples. If anyone has any questions, anyone?
You can add your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. We don't have any right now, Amy, so we can move forward, but we will stop if I'll wave you down if we do get any.
Okay. So I think this is always important to showcase some anecdotes about how things have worked or not. So I'm just going to speak to some examples from my own personal experience. So customers are obviously important, I think, in terms of, communicating during a crisis. That goes without saying. Again, I'm saying that a lot, but I say it goes without saying and then I say it. But ongoing engagement is critical. So I work with a CRM provider. Their whole job is to manage customer sales and relationships. And they said what they've seen, especially right now, is that a lot of small businesses in their network think that people don't want to hear from them because big brands are out there communicating. There's really not much new to report. And so essentially their position has been to take a back seat and just wait till things cool down, and then talk to them once they feel like they want to hear from them. And he said, and he's a CMO who used to work at Salesforce, his whole job was in managing customer relationships. And he said that is absolutely the worst thing you can do, because just like the media and investors, customers have very short memories, but they have long memories when it comes to feeling ignored or abandoned. So to just go away because you think that they don't want to hear from you, and then try to reemerge and restart a relationship once things start to get back on track and get back to a new normal, can have irreprehensible damage to your relationships with them. They want to feel supported, even if they're not responding to emails that you're sending. It's important to remember that everybody right now likes to know that someone's there for them. And it doesn't mean, again, that you have to go over the top with communicating with them every other day or even every week. The cadence can be up to you, but you can't expect to touch base with them. I think even once a month is too infrequent at this point. So even just an update on what's happening with your team to let them know, how that might impact their team is important, because you can't get that back after months go by and you haven't talked to them. So regular touch points are really important. The next thing is the team. So this is the one that I feel like, generally speaking, falls off the radar. At least it did for me. The cobbler's children has no shoes is never, more true for a PR person. I was in the first 2 weeks of this, helping my clients craft really thoughtful messaging for their teams. And guess what? I never sent a message to my own team. So I have a small team of 6, and, they were reviewing and reading the emails I was writing for businesses to send to their own internal employees. So part of me thought, well, they know that, I'm here for them and I want to support what they're doing. But it's different if you're addressing them directly. So I think it's important to remember that they are a vital part of your operations. Even if it's just you have 2 people, or maybe you have a couple contractors that work for you, or a freelancer that you worked with last month on a project. I think it's important to really connect and let them know that you're here for them, whether it's, offering more flexible hours, whether it's, sending a meal their way, but just reinforcing that you understand that between e-learning and doing their job, that life is chaotic right now, and that you understand that things might look a little different than they did in February. So again, I think that's important. Second of all, I think it's really important. And again, maybe it's just 2 of you that run the business. And that is still a good time to check in with each other, but also to establish roles and responsibilities right now because of how different the work day is. So, that's number 1. Number 2, if you do have a team of a few people, it's important to, in your mind, know who is the number 2. And that from this standpoint is important, in case, God forbid, that someone gets sick or someone needs to jump in on something for a kid that's home, or just schedules change, really establishing how to keep things moving. But you can't do that without communicating with your team about it and about, what they need and what you need to continue to run the business. So operations, this is a little outside of the communication standpoint, but I think I wanted to reinforce it because Rev1 has some, in their network, has some really amazing examples. I don't know if any of them are here right now, but who have pivoted and really thought outside the box about how they can evolve with the market and with what their customers need. So Healthy Roster, for example, is using their platform that connects patients with physical therapists and doctors. So it's basically a telehealth platform, and they're using it for a live chat and video communication, and they're offering it for free until July. So the reason I'm using some of these examples is because it's great to pivot and think how you can support it, but then you also have to make sure you're communicating it effectively out in the marketplace so that people actually know what you're doing and why. Aware is helping, build secure, safe remote workforces. ScriptDrop launched recently a nationwide delivery service. They were, not nationwide before this. And so I think it's important to, again, think about how you can be a supportive partner and how you can effectively communicate that what you're doing to your team, to your community, because it's not enough just to pivot and do it. You also have to let people know that it's available. Finally, preparation. This is a good time as you're preparing emails, as questions are coming in, that you are taking notes and capturing things that have worked and haven't worked, so that you can build a crisis plan. I can I can also maybe after this share an outline for one, but a good crisis plan really develops some scenario planning, so that if this happens, then this is what is engaged from there. And I think you never really need to reinvent the wheel. So when you get a good email from a partner or from a brand, and you like the way it's worded, save it. Just simply start saving communications that you either receive or send, and use it as a template for the next time. You can always take pieces of it and reuse it. I think, it's very hard to do this after the fact, but it's really helpful to take what you're learning now and start to develop some semblance of an outline of how you can do it better next time and learn from what's happened. An example, a client that I worked with, without giving too much information, they were involved in the Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone. And they had an onslaught of really negative, aggressive press about what they did or didn't do to help mitigate that outbreak. And they did not have a crisis plan. And so trying to get on the phone with someone in West Africa to try to message things for their lab there, while also managing the team in San Francisco, it became a beast that, was impossible to manage. So we developed a crisis plan after everything settled, but that was, a year and a half into managing what had happened. Had we known and had we prepared scenario planning and understood who was the point of contact in certain countries and areas, certain expertise, who do we tap, it would have made that situation much, much easier and gone much smoother. Also think about, I don't know how many of you are receiving incoming media requests or have relationships with media, but preparing media statements is also important, so that everyone in the company, again, whether it's 2 or 20 people, are using the same script, so that you're not getting, a rogue comment here or there, that everyone's sticking to the same language. And then the same is true for social media. And then this gets back to the team, making sure when you're communicating with the team about next steps and what's happening, that they're very clear on things like your media policy and your social media policy. So I know social media is a very individual thing, and most people, even have the disclaimer that they're only representing themselves. However, again, brand damage can happen very quickly. So making sure that people understand confidentiality of things, and that they, at a high level, understand how we want to communicate what we're doing as a company, so that you don't have people firing off tweets about things you don't want in public. Questions, comments? Keep going. So in terms of how to develop this communications, this is a good template for a lot of things as it relates to outbound marketing and communications, including emails, including correspondence with different parties that we talked about, press releases, media statements, and even just general presentations, I think. But the inverted pyramid style is how, particularly reporters, if you look at an article, this is how they write, and this is the way people digest and really, I think, can more easily understand a story when it's positioned this way. So in a lot of times in business communications, it's the other way around, where people start with the details about the market or the opportunity, and then they build up to the big finish, which is, you should buy our, you should invest in our solution, or this is the platform that you need to, drive sales. whereas it really should be the other way around. And that's true in crisis too. So start with the lead. So we're operating as normal on a remote schedule, or, start with the most important. What do you want them to take away from it? And then you can drill down into how you're addressing other aspects of what's happening right now. The same is true for, if there's negative press, you start with, first and foremost, the, sensitivity of our data is always, the most important aspect of what we're doing. And then you drill down into maybe addressing some of the specifics of what happened, instead of, again, flipping it and starting with getting into things that happen and then finishing with, we always take privacy very seriously. It's a nuance, but I think it's an important one. And that's true in how you communicate with your team or with your partners during an event like this. Some other do's and don'ts of general storytelling, which I think is applicable to times of crisis, is, again, knowing your key messages. So that starts with, what are the three main things that people should know about your company, and why it's unique and different, and what the benefit is. So start there and then fold those into all the things that you're saying. So as the, leading startup studio in Ohio, Rev1 is taking this very seriously and supporting our portfolios in all aspects of their business right now. So, if that's our key messaging, how do we weave that into current times? Speaking in headlines and conclusion first. So especially when we're talking about newsletters, emails, blogs, it's easy to get long-winded and go on and on and on. The reality is, people need bite-sized nuggets. I've seen this from brands over the course of the last couple of months, but some of them are really lengthy emails, which in reality, it's probably unlikely that someone's going to read the whole thing. So speaking in short headlines in an email or, in communications is important. And that means, 1 to 2 sentences max, and then move to the next thought. And I would say your emails should be 5 to 6 sentences max. Highlight key points and emphasize what they're going to learn. Communicating clearly, avoiding jargon. This isn't the time to pepper it with all the features and functionality of what you're doing and what you're providing in the market. You can speak to what you're doing for the industry or for your customers, but it's not the time to oversell, and it's definitely not the time to pepper it with inside industry speak. Use facts and anecdotes. So if you're sending a note about how your team's working or how you're evolving with the times, for example, you can say, for example, our team is working on a flexible schedule, and some of our team members are online from X to X, others are taking it from this to this. Something to give some insight and demonstrate how you're, putting your money where your mouth is in terms of adjusting with the new normal. Be engaging, be likable. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to open it with a personal, this is hard. I am challenged by trying to manage it all during the day with 2 small kids at home or something. Personalize it. And I think everyone, you can hear this, it's a resounding, we're in this together. But the more you can showcase that as a CEO when you're engaging with these different parties, it humanizes you, it humanizes your company. And I think it really makes everyone, feel better about what you're about to say to them. And then keep it cool. Don't get overly aggressive or defensive, especially this would be more in the, reacting to what someone has written or said. Some storytelling don'ts, and again, some of these are for, more specific media situations, but this is a good one. The first one is good for any audience, I would argue, but nothing's off the record. So if you run into an investor or a customer at the grocery store and they say, do you really, they say, I'm just curious because I'm, stressed too. Do you think your business is really going to survive COVID? I don't think any of you would do this, but even if you're at the grocery store. Usually my example is you're at happy hour together, but I don't think anyone's doing that right now. So I'm trying to think of a real life example. Do not go there. I don't know. It's going to be really tough. Our market's really shrunk. We've had to furlough a couple freelancers that worked for us or whatever the case may be. I mean, don't do that. Just, we're optimistic. It's obviously challenging, but we are, adjusting to the new normal. Like short, sweet, competent, calm, move on. Because at the end of the day, whether it's an investor, a partner, a reporter, they're human beings. It's going to be hard for them to compartmentalize what you said that was off the record versus what you've told them in the past that they could share with others. So just don't share anything you wouldn't want to see in a tweet or in an article or come back to bite you or haunt you later on. Don't discuss competitors. Oh, so I read this company is closing their doors. Do you think that that's a sign for what's happening for you? Don't ever assume what's happening with someone else. Also, don't give them any free press. Not that that's good press, but I'm trying to keep this in the context. There's my dog. Of the crisis communications. But first of all, don't rename the competitor, because again, you're just giving them free press. And second of all, you wouldn't want them to get into making assumptions about what's happening at your business. So certainly don't do that for them. So what I can tell you is that we are adjusting. We have made some modifications, and we are optimistic that we're going to come out this in a new way, but more thoughtful about how we grow or something like that. Like basically, I just took that negative question and just didn't answer it, but it somewhat sounded like I did. And that's true for all your audiences. Don't over answer. This is what we just talked about. 1 to 2 sentences max, and stop. Don't be fixated by a question. You don't have to answer anything that you don't feel comfortable with. You can always say, and again, this is for everybody, if a customer calls in and asks a question about when you're getting back to work or a process that you're unclear of, I'll check on that and get back to you. That is perfectly fine. No one expects you to have all the answers at every step of the way, especially right now. Don't repeat negative. Don't fake and never lie. Again, with that example in Sierra Leone, a lot of the challenge with managing that crisis from a communication standpoint was trying to get to the truth. Because once you know the truth, then you can figure out the best way to message around it and strategically and thoughtfully share what is necessary to share and what is not. But if you don't know the truth at the end of the day, it is impossible, I'm telling you, to effectively communicate, because the skeletons in your closet will come out, and you want to know about them before the end. And then this goes back to making sure you have a good relationship with your team and your network, but don't air company gossip or dirty laundry. You want to make sure that your team feels supported and safe, and that they are on the same page about all your communications strategies, but also your guidelines. Questions, comments? So here's some emails, and again, I will send these out to everybody after the fact, but as you can see, this one is for a customer. This was one that parts of it that I used for a client. This was, I think, the first week of the shutdown. So again, it's fine to open it with a bit of uncertainty, but also acknowledging that things are hard right now. You're not sending emails of fluff that are just glossing over what's happening. Acknowledging that this is scary and uncertain should be part of your email and your correspondence, because people know what's going on. And I think to just skate by that is it's going to fall on deaf ears. People will not keep reading. Again, these may seem a bit formulaic, but I think, as we talked about earlier with the customer touch points, it is a touch point. It's a time to say, this is what our team is doing. We're here for you. We're still working. These are the hours we're working. We're really in this with you. And I think coming from you, the CEO, is critical. And that's another piece. Sometimes you might say, well, my sales or my contractors, they'll touch base with the customer relationships that they own. but it's your brand, it's your company. So it's up to you to communicate with them. And it really falls on you to be the face of the business. And then this is one to consider for the team. So again, I think acknowledgement and support is important. And it doesn't just mean sending an email. Again, I think I said this from my team, I think it was like week 3 that I finally sent an email to them like, oh, hey, thanks for working so much, and appreciate that you're also doing it while e-learning with your children, and that things have been really busy for us. So, I mean, I should have done that week 1, but I think, again, like other small business owners, I'm just trying to keep the train on the tracks and keep things moving. But if they start to feel overwhelmed or burdened or like they're not supported, then I cannot keep my train on the tracks. I need them to keep going. So acknowledging that and just saying thank you is sometimes enough, but it carries a lot of weight. And then thinking about little things to do to say thank you to your team. I think that also just goodwill to build up. And it's also, might encourage, not that you're doing it for this, but a positive tweet about the brand they work for that's really supporting them. So I only have 6 employees, but I had lunch delivered to them last week. And I didn't do it for any other reason than just to acknowledge that it's been hard. And so I think things like that can go a long way in, again, just supporting during a time of crisis, the people that are important to your business. So we've come to the end, and I think I just threw a lot at you. But in my opinion, the most important takeaways for communicating during a crisis are as follows. Transparency is critical. Accuracy, obviously important. Consistency. So it's not just one email and the crisis is over. And care, like being sensitive and compassionate about the issue at hand and how it's affecting your network is important. And that's the bulk of it.
Thank you, Amy. That was incredibly informative. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this. We're going to open it to questions now. Please feel free to hop into the Q&A portion, and I will read out the questions that pop up in there. One question that came in was, if you are unsure of what's going on in your business, how can you still communicate with your customers, even if you're not sure what the next step really is?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's true for most businesses right now. It's very unclear and it's uncharted waters, and people aren't sure of how this is going to impact their business or how they're going to continue to manage it or move forward. But I think some acknowledgement of that is fair. And making it more of like, we're all in this together. We are all uncertain about how this will eventually play out, but our mission is to continue to support you, our customer. And, it can be very generic, but that's how I would position it, is pumping yourself into the greater pool of businesses that is every business right now that is unclear of how this will actually impact the market in your specific company and what the day will look like, in 2 years from now. But so acknowledging we're, just like every business, we're unsure of how this is going to play out, but we are here and committed to making, to supporting our customers like you every day by, work remotely and continuing to work on evolving our platform or whatever it is. That's how I would do it.
Great. Thank you. So we are happy to take questions. Oh, am I frozen? I might be frozen. Sorry if I'm frozen. We're happy to take questions via email after this. And I'm going to email out the presentation that Amy gave to all those that registered. And we look forward to doing this again in 2 weeks. Thank you again, Amy, for your time on this. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.